My name is Doug Berger, and I'm Managing Director of Business Growth Services for Headwaters. This is excerpts from a keynote that I gave to CEOs and CFOs of family-owned and privately owned middle-market companies, and the subject was how to become a disruptive competitor. The best practices for growth become common practices. How many of you have done lean or stage gate? You might have been one of the early adopters of that, only to find out that a couple of years later, now all your competitors have done exactly the same thing. We've always got to be thinking that whatever I'm doing today, giving me competitive advantage, somebody's going to catch up. I'm going to now have to look at what the next disruptive competitive advantage is that I'm going to take on. So we're going to look at disruption in the sense of what are the practices that we can take on that are going to give us the next disruptive competitive advantage. I'm going to approach this in a fun way. Doctor, I'm having growing pains. And what's the first thing the doctor does when you come in and you say you have some pain? He tells me, tell me, what are your pains? Take a look at this list. Competitive advantage erodes. Growth has plateaued. Finding new customers. The product line is tired. Problems in executing. Need new market opportunities. And an old mindset in the company. These are typical problems that CEOs tell me that they're dealing with. Well, when I'm doing a half-day public seminar, I'm doing in-company, I really want to come out with a deliverable. We can think of this as a deliverable for this morning. So take out a pen and circle or put a check mark. Now, which are your top pain points? In the upper left corner. Just again, we want to have them clearly in mind as we go through this, so that's a reference point. We're going to be working through this placemat. So now, if we look at innovation, where does most innovation happen? Most innovation happens in product performance and in the product platform. However, if you ask where does innovating have the most impact, you get a very different view of the world. And you see that overall, innovating has the highest impact when you're looking at things like finance, the business model, or when you're looking at the delivery system. And if you think of the companies that have been major disruptors recently, off-the-shelf technology, but they may be combining it in new ways into a new business model or a new delivery system. So I'm going to use the word innovating rather than innovation. Why? Because almost everybody's been wired that innovation means products and services. And I want to use the word innovating to represent a much broader spectrum of turning business ideas into money. And so I'm going to walk you through a 5-step process for stepping up growth by innovating. And the first step of the process is this question, what are your growth goals? Now, every company has formal growth goals, and if you're a top member of management, you tell everybody these are our formal growth goals, and you deploy the formal growth goals throughout the organization. Everyone at the top also has aspirational goals, and some of those they don't share with people. Those are the goals that really light you up and turn you on. That's what gets you up in the morning, are your aspirational goals. And aspirational goals, by their very nature, are bold. Aspirational goals, by their very nature, have a certain element of being impractical. I can see some things I can do, but if you said, can I see the entire path to delivering on an aspirational goal? The answer is, of course not. If you could, it wouldn't be aspirational. So I want you to have in mind, while I'm talking, aspirational goals. With that in mind, we want to talk about the growth gap. And the growth gap is the gap between your current trajectory and these aspirational goals. You can think of it as a growth gap in revenue, market share, profitability, or let's say valuation. So therefore, when we look at it, we've got our current and our predictable growth. And then we've got our really ambitious growth, and that gives us a growth gap. And that's where we're going to work. We're going to work on how do we close the growth gap. So there's some strategies that I've developed in my work with clients. The first is what I call a productivity strategy. And the productivity strategy is aimed at outcompeting. And the measures of the productivity strategy are, I'm increasing my market share, therefore I'm getting more revenue, and I'm increasing my profitability. That's the productivity strategy. And I'm doing it by outcompeting. Then there's an entrepreneurial strategy where what I'm really going after here are really new revenue streams. I'm taking the company into new places. And the measure in that area is, have I identified really big arenas in which there are lots of customers with big problems and then solutions that I can offer. Some of you are going to be more oriented towards productivity and that strategy, and some of you are going to be more oriented towards the entrepreneurial strategy. At any point in time, I would expect that somewhere around 2/3 to 3/4 of the people are oriented around productivity, about 1/4, 1/3 are oriented around entrepreneurial. If they come back a year from now, the percent will probably stay the same, but the mix of who said what might change. Different times in a company's life cycle, it's appropriate to be focused on one growth strategy or the other. What we're going to do is, first we're going to take a deep dive into the productivity strategy and some things that you can do on productivity. Then we're going to take a dive into the entrepreneurial strategy and things you could do there. Things that I'm going to say in productivity apply to new growth areas and new revenue things. And things that I'm going to say about entrepreneurial apply to productivity. These are the typical tactics for productivity growth. Whether you're a publicly traded company, whether you're a small company, these are the tactics that almost everybody uses for productivity growth. If you read the Wall Street Journal, you rarely hear a company doing anything other than these. So I want to take a different perspective on growth than those 7. I want to start by saying, where am I going to see growth? This is a view that CFOs love. This is really measurable. So we're going to look at this and go, if I'm going to really get growth, I'm going to get growth by retaining more customers, acquiring new customers, getting more value out of the customers that we've got, getting more revenue over the life of the customer. I'm going to get revenue by focusing the company on segments of outsized growth rather than segments that are growing slower. New customer segments that we're currently not serving and don't even define today as our market, but could. By optimizing the value chain and optimizing it in such a way that, again, it gives me a disruptive competitive advantage. If the typical delivery time right now on a new order is, say, 21 days, and I could drop the delivery time to 7, would that give me a competitive advantage? Now, if it's not, therefore, if I take that growth delta from the high level, I can now start to map it down. Customer retention, what do I want to do? Well, you know, there are some customers I actually want to lose. They're not good business for us. There's a whole different segment of customers that we really need to focus on retaining. When it comes to new customer segments, a couple of years from now, we need to be getting 10% of our revenue from new customer segments that we're not currently in. Now I can start to have that delta with more refinement than I started out with at the top. All of you are probably familiar in some form or another with doing a strategic assessment, where you look at the market, the competitive dynamics, your own capabilities, the constraints that you're under, which might be regulatory or financial. I want to talk about doing a strategic assessment with a different frame, a different lens. And the lens I want to talk about is, first, doing it as an outsider in. The mistake that a lot of companies make is they do a strategic assessment from their point of view, except that the industry and the customers don't look from your point of view. They look at it as an outsider looking in. And that's where lots of times companies look and go, we really don't have a competency to do that. They hire firms to go and do the assessment outsider in. The second thing is, I want to overlay on the assessment these areas where you're going to focus on for growth. So instead of just going out into the market and assessing the competition, or going out in the market and assessing the market dynamics, I want to look into the market now with the deltas in mind that are part of my strategy. Why? I'm looking for the opportunities that are not in plain sight that are going to help me to close my particular growth gap. So that's a different way of doing an assessment. We want to do the assessment with the areas of opportunity clearly in mind, because that's what we want to filter our perception for. Now I want to talk about some key drivers. Now we've got some areas that are interesting for us. How do we start to operationalize new areas of growth for productivity? So there's a term venture capitalists use. which is not every investment is a good investment, and you have to drown some of your puppies. You'll love them. They're cute. They're cuddly, but they're not going anywhere. So you have puppies within your company that you need to drown. Every successful disruptor has to have an ability to do internal disruption. The next thing is you got to get out of the office. The bigger the company, the more likely you're spending more and more time in the office. You'll find the opportunities by you going out and talking to customers, finding out what their problems are. Customers of competitors, finding out what they're happy with, what their problems are. Not just doing a sales call, but you're actually out talking to customers to understand what's going on in their world that could be the source of new growth opportunities. Another growth practice is you resegment the market. The market developed one way. Now technology's changed. Customer requirements have changed. And oftentimes the way people are segmenting the market hasn't changed at all. Something that used to be a competitive advantage, now everyone has that. It's no longer a competitive advantage. It's just a requirement. That doesn't give you any market segmentation. Every one of these is a technique. Every one of these has processes, skills, training behind it. If you want to find out more about that, you just reach out to me. These are the disruptive practices. Hunters versus farmers. Most salespeople, by and large, are farmers. They're great at maintaining and growing existing relationships. But if you look at your list, and a lot of your list is new segments or new customers, you need hunters. Hunters are a different breed, and you need to manage hunters differently. If you manage a hunter the same way that you manage a farmer, and the hunters will leave. There's this whole area of how do you find hunters, and there are tools to do that. There are assessment tools to help you identify people who have a natural disposition to hunt rather than to farm, and there are different management processes and techniques that you use to encourage the hunters versus the farmers. There's another idea. It's transitioning from a view of the world that's a sales cycle to a view of the world that's a buying cycle. Disruptors are shifting their view to organizing their company around the buying cycle. They're saying, how do people make decisions to buy when they recognize there's a need? How much of what they're doing is happening on the internet before they ever call us, or is happening through social media, through friends, through reading? I really need to map out what the buying cycle is. And the second thing is, which relates to that, is what are people getting out of every one of our touch points? Are we building the brand in every touch point that we have with a customer? Are they walking away with exactly the brand experience we want them to be having at every touch point? Is one touch point moving them along in their buying cycle to the next touch point? And am I ready for them? There's a whole area there around designing customer touch points. Let me go through these other ones very, very quickly, and then we'll move on to entrepreneurial. Community of enthusiasts. Everyone in social media thinks of that as a social media environment. How many have likes of their web page? If you're in B2B, social media isn't much of a thing. But community of enthusiasts are like users groups and other things like that are building energy for who you are and connecting other enthusiastic users of your products and services together so they become a community. And the stronger your community is, the stronger your company's future for growth is, because of the viral implications of that. We've got lead customers. These are the customers where the outsized growth is happening, and I can get insights about that. Instead of thinking about developing products, I'm developing product platforms. This lean transformation is taking principles of lean and using it to create disruptive advantages in your value delivery chain. Data analytics, huge. The amount of data that's now available on customers internally, mining those data analytics for real insights and action is becoming now new differentiators of the top competitors. And finally, what I call the innovating cycle, which is how you introduce some of this stuff in your company, is you don't just plop it in. We want to pose a challenge to ourselves to do a step up. What's that area we want to pose a challenge to ourselves? We want to retain more of these high-value customers. Let's investigate what's going on in that area. Let's do some limited exploring, do some workshops, talk to some people. Let's experiment a little bit and try some things out internally to see what works and what doesn't work. Then we start to enter it in a more formal way into the company, and then we start to expand and scale. This is the innovating cycle. So when you're trying to refresh the company, when you're trying to instill a new mindset, at each step along the way here, you're engaging more and more people. And you're engaging them in trying on new things, and in the course of trying on new things, inevitably, people's mindset changes. Seeing what works and what doesn't, and what works we expand on, what doesn't work, we either pivot and learn from, or we just drop it. This sums up productivity, and my experience is if you're trying on these new practices, it's worth a minimum of 15% in additional growth over the next 18 months. Now let's move to entrepreneurial strategy. Entrepreneurial strategy is always aspirational. You never have to go after, quote, new fundamental revenue streams. What makes something entrepreneurial? It makes it entrepreneurial if there's a high ratio of assumptions to knowledge. There's a lot of uncertainty. That's what people would say it's risk. What makes it a problem is that people fail to test their assumptions early and cheap. Jump in, spend a lot of money, launch it, and then find out that they had some bad assumption. We don't pivot early, or we don't kill something early. We're fishing in a pond that we think's a big pond. But there are no fish where we are, so we got to move to a different place. We got to do that early. We tie investment to budgets. Rather than we tie spending some money to what we're learning and the milestone points. These are mistakes. These are problem areas that big companies all the way down to startups make these kinds of mistakes and have these kinds of problems when going after revenue streams that have high uncertainty. They rely on in-house capabilities when a lot of what you're doing in the revenue stream requires capabilities that you don't have in-house. The people are central. Some people are great at starting things, and some people are great at running things. And the people that are great at starting things are not always great at running things, and vice versa. And finally, as we talked about right at the beginning, bold is not immediately practical. I want to start in what's practical. Then as I get into it, I find out that some things are practical now that weren't practical 6 months ago. Now I have some new things I can do. My field of practicality expands as I enter rather than expecting everything to be practical before I enter. Now let's take a look at big places that entrepreneurial growth happens, new business models, emerging or disruptive benefits. You will find I never talk about emerging or disruptive technologies. Why? Those are usually lost leaders. If you can't associate a technology with a disruptive benefit, leave it to the startup community, leave it to universities. You have to have a disruptive benefit. And then, of course, you have to know who the customers are they're going to benefit. I never talk disruptive technologies at the outset. New value chains, the Internet's doing that all over the place, and game-changing execution. That's taking that value stream optimization that we were talking about to a whole new level. Now we're going to do that market assessment, but now we're doing the market assessment not only from outside the company, we're doing a market assessment from outside the industry, because where disruption's likely to happen is from outside our industry. I want to look at what are new business models that are coming in from outside the industry and how they might relate. What are some new disruptive benefits that are starting to surface outside the industry that may now start to relate. Let's move to the particular practices and drivers. So one is this entrepreneurial mindset. There's a certain amount of entrepreneurial mindset you can develop, and there's a certain amount of entrepreneurial mindset you have to hire for. You've got to have people in the company who are naturally entrepreneurial. We talk about challenging assumptions. That's the easy part. Challenging beliefs are the things you believe in. We got to challenge those. You built the company. It might be multi-generational. There are embedded beliefs about the market and the right way to run a company. Foresight, bringing a disruptive lens, that's what we were talking about doing that assessment from outside the industry to looking at what could come in. opportunity arenas, because we're no longer looking for particular opportunities to play in. We're starting to scope out the market in terms of big ponds to fish. And if there's no fish over here, I pick up my boat and I move over there. And I'd be agile enough to be able to do that. Instead of developing detailed product plans, we're developing a business model. Who are the target customers? How are we going to acquire them? What's the revenue characteristics going to look like? The cost characteristics going to look like? Who are we going to go into strategic relationships to help accelerate our entry in the market and de-risk entering the market? Design thinking, which is really based on having an empathetic understanding of your customer. You go out and you do deep observation of what's going on. You walk around the factory floor, getting inside the customer's shoes. Discovery-driven planning. When you're entering something, there are assumptions. Some assumptions have real financial implications. Great entrepreneurs do this very intuitively. They know which key assumptions really are going to affect revenue and profitability. Discovery-driven planning is a process where you can lay that out on a spreadsheet. Then you know what assumptions you have to test. So then you do smart strategic experiments. You look to create things with customers rather than create it and then go find customers. That de-risks it. Strategic relationships. You want to be very agile with your capital rather than investing in capital. And then there's this entrepreneurial execution model where you think about what you're doing like it's an internal startup. The benefits of this model are we're looking for opportunities that have asymmetric upside. That's a strange term, but what it really means is that if things go well, this is huge. And I want to invest in revenue streams that have the opportunity, the possibilities there, not just for good, but for huge. I want to bound the loss or investment that I'm willing to take. I'm looking to have a high probability of success and faster to revenue and scale. So this model proves itself out by delivering those 4 key benefits. And I've been using this model with companies of all sizes. And then I have to ante some things in order to be able to go into this. I have to do things differently if I want to play entrepreneurially. This is that entrepreneurial environment where we have to be agile, lean, quick to change, not process bound. We have to have starters that are involved, not finishers or runners. We have to be doing risk mitigation. We want to surface the risks. We want to create a register of where our risks are and then grow. What experiment or what else can we do to find out how we can de-risk this thing? So I create risk registers with people. And everyone comes to meetings and goes, I've identified 3 new risks. And people go, fabulous. Whereas if people come to you in the course of a normal operating meeting and say to you, I've identified 3 new risks to our new business, you go, get them out of here. In-house capabilities. What can I do with the resources I've got? And where do I need to bring in extended capabilities outside of the resources that I currently have? Where are there experts that I want to be able to tap from the university, retired executives? Startups are tapping for free world-class brain power that retired, wants to be intellectually engaged. These people love helping startups. They have a full-time job helping startups for free. And then there are new ways to do financing. Even if you're a privately held company, we, for example, work on mezzanine financing. We work on patient capital with family offices. There's lots of ways to do financing. Now we've got entrepreneurial growth and the best practices for entrepreneurial growth. So I'd ask you one final question. As a senior executive or the owner or the president of your company, are you and your top team in alignment on growth? High-performing companies consistently outcompete traditional companies. I can start to put some of these practices in place, and the result of that is we'll be more high-performing, and that's going to affect everything we do regarding growth. So if we look and summarize this, there's where are your pain points? There's innovating versus innovation. Well, what are the areas where innovating is going to have the most impact? What's my growth gap? Then I looked at the productivity strategy and the growth gap, and what are the best practices for productivity strategy. Then we shifted to the entrepreneurial strategy, and we looked at the practices that have line of sight, direct linkage to entrepreneurial type growth. I'd like to leave you with this one thought. that in adopting these practices, you become the disruptor, and then you leave the competition worried. Thank you.